Hey guys, what's happening? So I was just thinking, I'm not sure how many of you guys may be into God of War, but because we tend to share common interests within certain things, I kind of thought it would be interesting if we were to get into God of War Fallen God, which had released from Dark Horse Comics, and it's also written by Chris Robertson, who wrote the adaptation to the 2018 game, and in that case, that series was more like a prequel to the story of 2018 God of War, so if you liked that one, chances are you were looking forward to this as well. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so before we dive in, first I want to say potential spoilers for any God of War game, which at least at the time of this video is up until God of War 2018, and I say that because I'll be making references to events both before and after this series, so let me just put that out there first. But aside from that, I do want to also mention like the 2018 comic series for God of War. That series had taken place not too long before the opening of the 2018 game, and in this case, Fallen God, it takes place right after God of War 3, and when this series concludes, it'll land right before your 2018 God of War comic series, which was the prequel to your 2018 God of War game. So where in that series, Atreus' mother, Faye, was still alive, and at a time where Kratos was still working on his rage issues, his family was then attacked by the Berserkers, who had used the bear totem to tap into the strength of a bear god. But in this case, we're taking a step even further back, and it's here where we pick up after the conclusion of God of War 3, which had ended with Kratos destroying his father Zeus with his bare hands, but also with him discovering his possession of the power of hope, which Athena had came back to get after Kratos had killed Zeus. Kratos had released that power into the world, denying it from Athena, and doing so by impaling himself with the blade of Olympus. But after this had happened, and with Kratos not dying, he had then immediately after begun to send himself into exile. And with doing this, Kratos just wanted to get as far away from Olympus, from Sparta, and from his past, and find a peace that he couldn't find in death. And one of the first things that he did going into exile was cast the Blades of Chaos off of a cliff into the ocean, which at this point there was plenty of, after killing Poseidon. But within this attempt for self-exile, Kratos retreated into darkness within a dark cave, hoping that here he can find the closest approximation to what he would consider to be a peaceful death, or at least the closest thing to it. But with coming here, the Blades of Chaos, they still return to him. And for Kratos, finding this peace and moving forward, he believes would nearly be impossible without getting rid of this part of his past. With their history from Ares, the previous God of War, who had also tricked Kratos within his own rage and bloodlust to kill his wife and daughter. Which is why for Kratos, getting rid of these blades is a crucial part for him in the process of finding solitude and finding peace, which is why he then attempts to lose them again by setting sail and casting them into the depths of the sea in hopes that this time they would never return from the bottom of the ocean. But after his second attempt of trying to discard the blades within the depths of the ocean, he then continues his journey to find a new terrain which he would consider to be suitable for rest. But here's the interesting thing about his travels, and the question of is his journey led by free will versus circumstance causing him to walk into his destiny. Because for one, we're not told how long it's been since he casted the blades into the ocean, but from that time till now, we're given the idea of what appears to be Kratos traveling from one point to the next led by choice, which is the choice to find peace and rest in isolation. But even with this happening, there's this underlying question of is this journey within itself really led by him making a choice? Because even now, at this point, with finding a new place that he chose, which is also a land that is foreign to him, but he intentionally came here because he was trying to move directionally away from the location of his past, and that's what drove Kratos to toss the blades in the ocean, which then drove him through the harsh lands to find a place to rest his head. And when he found that place to rest his head, the blades then reappeared, and when they reappeared, for him this was then a sign that it's time to move again. And with this happening, like to Kratos, there's just the frustration of trying to get rid of these blades and him trying to find isolation, but with him being too focused on his frustration and focused on the idea of getting further and further away, he doesn't realize that this journey in a grander scope is leading him more so on a specific path, which in the grand scope is destiny once again guiding his footsteps and leading Kratos on a journey which he believes to be of his free will. But as I mentioned earlier, like with the idea of Kratos losing track of time, this then lines up with the idea of him traveling where destiny wants him to be and when destiny wants him to be there. Because at this point, Kratos has now traveled to a land that is unfamiliar, which for him, like at a first look, it just intrigues him at this point that he's found people. And especially after him previously killing Poseidon and having a majority of the world flooded, which then took out so many people, and from then till now throughout his journey, this is the first time that he's finding civilization. But also with him finding these people, he then investigates because he senses something here that's familiar. And in this case, the thing that is familiar is these people looking at him and trembling in fear. And the reason why when he arrives here that these people are afraid of him is because the people here, even in this far off land, they know the stories of the ghost of Sparta. And this is one of the things that plays into the idea of the decisions that Kratos had made and the actions that he had taken. They have spread out to affect the world in its entirety. And throughout however long this may have been, these stories were passed down and people know of his history. But it's also in this land where he comes across a prophet who tells Kratos that destiny has led him here to the land of pharaohs at this specific time, which is also close to their time of need. But for Kratos, he's not trying to hear any of this, because in his case, he believes that he's traveling of his own free will, and he's perhaps suffering a bit from destiny exhaustion at this point. And for that reason, he doesn't want to hear from this prophet about his new destiny, so he turns the prophet away, not realizing that the actions he had taken prior to this point, they have led him to the land of pharaohs, because there is more that destiny requires of him in this land at this time. But as Kratos turns his back on this prophet, the prophet then tells him that not even Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, the god of war, that not even he can escape his destiny, no matter how far he goes or how fast he runs. But after leaving that prophet and the town, Kratos then travels through the different terrains of the local area, and it takes him through harsh deserts, through steep mountains, to where he's once again looking for a place of rest and isolation. And even throughout this time that he's roaming around, once again he loses track of the days and nights, which then lead him to the next area where he can finally find water. But even when he gets there, he's spoken to by the wildlife, who then tell him the same thing that he was told by the prophet, which was more or less along the lines of it's time to stop running and to embrace your destiny. But this was also along the lines of Kratos having his first sign of seeing that all creatures and all things, they're all subject to a purpose, no matter how powerful or how great or how small, and every creature must serve its purpose, as so it is written. But even so, again, in going in what appears to be months without sleep, Kratos then dozes off and he wakes up to the blades once again, which this time takes him closer to what appears to be the specific destination that destiny wants him at this point in time. But for Kratos, who once again is much younger and much closer to the years of his rage, and in his case, at this time he's aware that something is causing the blades to reappear, but from his perspective he sees it as a repetitive torment rather than what it truly is, which is the blades reappearing in every place that he finds comfort. But with doing so, for Kratos, it's a tool of direction. And it's the combination of the blades appearing and his desire for isolation, and even the details of like the variety of the terrain of the land, which are all subject to what is written, and they're all working together to order his steps to the specific place where destiny wants him to be. Because everything serves its purpose. Because with Kratos being pushed by frustration and pulled by the idea of finding rest in isolation, which is the destination that he wants, but also like unknowingly along this path, he still finds the things that he truly needs. And because of that, time and time again, he finds water to drink, he finds food to eat, and he's fueled along the way by his determination not to quit and not to surrender. But also with this happening, like in a way, like along with destiny guiding him, that also like the hope that he had taken from Pandora's box and released into the world, that it's perhaps playing a role like in a small way. And like maybe it is, or maybe that concept is just totally thrown out the window, but it's something that crossed my mind just kind of going through this. But at this point in time with Kratos reaching another spot which he's found suitable for rest, he then finds a bird that starts talking to him, and similar to before, he believes that he's just losing his mind. And because he's lacked so much rest, he believes that this whole thing of the blades reappearing and him running into creatures that are talking, that it's all just a product of him losing his mind. But as we know, that's not the case, and all of these elements are very real. But this time, unlike before, he responds to the creature and he poses the question like, when will he find this place that he's looking for, that he can finally find this rest? And when he does this, it tells him that no matter which direction he goes, that his destiny is in that destination. And because of that, like when he reaches the place to where he can go no further and he arrives in that location, that is the place that he needs to be. which in translation for Kratos, like exhaustion is the brake pedal. And at this time when he's arrived here, he's come exactly to that place. He grows weary, he passes out, which also means that at this time he's arrived at the location of which he's been guided to under the illusion more or less of free will, but this is exactly the place and time where destiny wants him to be. But we'll have to wait to the next issue to find out what that purpose is here in the Land of Pharaohs. Alright, so for issue 2, it picks up right from where we had seen Kratos in issue 1, to where he had wandered into the Land of the Pharaohs, which is definitely Egypt, though at no point in time is it specifically called Egypt, but instead we more or less know by the terrain and the creatures shown representing the different Egyptian gods. But this had brought us to a place of Kratos wandering to exhaustion, and as he drifts into this dream state, he's then approached by Athena, who appears very much like how we had seen her towards the end of like the God of War 3 game, to where when Kratos had defeated Zeus, Athena had then discovered that Kratos had been using a portion of her power. And so when she shows up here asking Kratos to return home to fulfill his destiny, it very much contradicts what we've seen going on with Kratos in the Land of Pharaohs. Because prior to this point, we've already discovered that wherever Kratos chooses to go, in air quotes around chooses, but with wherever he chooses to go, it'll always fall in line with what is written to be his destiny. So right away with Athena showing up here and telling Kratos to come home to fulfill his purpose, though it's not said directly, it really comes off as Athena having her own motives to get Kratos to restore the power of hope to her, of which previously he had already used and forfeit rather than just handing it right back over. But right after this, when Kratos awakens once again with the blades, at this point he still believes that it's Athena bringing them back rather than it being a higher power that has predetermined his path regardless of whatever land he may travel to. And when he wakes up, the prophet that we had seen before, he returns, and it's here where he tells Kratos that it is written that the hour that he'll be needed here is fast approaching. But when he tells Kratos to take up his blades and prepare for the battle to come, Kratos just throws the blades in the river, telling the prophet that he refuses to just be told what to do, either by what has been written by any god or any man. But then after doing this and following Kratos for like months of wandering, to where in his case he's trying to leave the past behind him and find peace. But after these months have passed with him speaking to this prophet, he then finds that he had went around in circles and ended up back in the same place. Which once again shows us that even of his own free will, his steps are ordered, and in spite of where he would desire to go, he will always find himself ending up in the time and place to where it is written that he should be. But when he finds his way back to the small village, the people, they are once again screaming and scared and terrified, but this time it's not of him. And instead of the people of this town running from him, they eventually run to him and beg for his help so that he would protect them and save them from the Chaos Beast. And so like from here, when we see the Chaos Beast, which is like this huge crocodile, who within this series is only referred to as the Chaos Beast, but with it emerging from this unnamed river, it almost appears as if it's supposed to be Sobek, the god of the Nile. Which I'll talk about a bit more in a little bit, because before Kratos had arrived here and the Chaos Beast had showed up, the people of this village had prayed to the gods for salvation, and when Kratos had arrived here now, they're telling him like he's just on time. But with Kratos responding and telling the people like, you prayed to the gods to save you from monsters, but the gods are monsters, and monsters do not answer prayers. And when he says this and the prophet we had seen before comes back shortly after, he then mentions to Kratos that he's possibly the answer to these prayers, which again just really refers back to Kratos following the path as it is written, which for this specific time in the course of this series, it's brought him to the Land of Pharaohs to slay specific beasts who, unbeknownst to Kratos, may actually be gods. And my reason for thinking this while going through this series is because it almost feels like the obscurity that we're given, with Kratos not knowing specifically where he is, or him not being given the name of any of these gods within the Land of Pharaohs. And with seeing this, it's almost like this series is reaching back to God of War 3 and hinting at this underlying plot to where when Kratos had opened Pandora's box and released the evils to the gods, that this had also taken effect in other lands as well, affecting more than just your Greek gods. But instead of Kratos being told clearly like where he's going and what he's doing, instead he's led to believe that he's just going of his own free will and in an attempt to control his own actions in the midst of all this obscurity and confusion, and that alone then provokes him to fight these beasts anyway. Even at this point, with him not being sure if they're real or if his mind's just playing tricks on him, or even if the prophet is real who's telling him that he needs to fight this beast because it's written. But once again, I do want to mention that a lot of these things are like just my thoughts or my interpretation, just kind of going off the little bit of context that we're given throughout this series, because with reading through this, like a majority of it is just pages of fighting with a bit of grunts here and there. But then when we get to the parts that do have context, it's either obscure, cryptic, or just plain repetitive, which is another reason why we're talking about issues 2 through 4 all in one video. But once again, I'll say it really feels like Chris Robertson just wasn't allowed to go into depth with a lot of things here, and because of that, we're kind of forced to take it at face value and just assume the rest. But at this point, with Kratos facing the Chaos Beast and successfully defeating it by tearing off its jaw, or whatever you call that part of a crocodile, not a crocodile expert, but with him doing this out of frustration and like begrudgingly saving these people, like right after he's confused once again because the people, they're still afraid, even though he's destroyed the beast like they asked. But then it's here where the prophet appears to him again, and with this prophet appearing and disappearing so quickly, Kratos again isn't really sure if like he's real or not. And when he shows up here, he tells Kratos like that really doesn't matter, and really all that matters is that he hears the prophet's words and he does what needs to be done. And as soon as the prophet says this, then a huge hippo comes out the water, which for the most part looks like a hippopotamus. But with what's being implied, this is possibly the goddess Tawret, who has also been said to live in or along the Nile River. So once again, a lot of these hints, they kind of lined up, but overall it's very obscure and very cryptic. But then again, with Kratos begrudgingly facing this beast, and at this point he only does it because the creature won't let him walk away or leave him alone. But then when he attacks this second beast head on, nothing happens. But when it hits him back, he's then knocked out cold, and this is what then takes us from the fight into another dream sequence kind of thing. And when this happens, it's very much like earlier when we saw him visited by Athena, to where he was taken to this dream space kind of purgatory type of thing. But when he arrives here back in this same space, he's then met by Athena, but also the presence of other gods, of whom we're only told that they're also from the land of pharaohs. And so when Kratos awakens here, so to speak, before Athena and what appears to be Ibis, the Egyptian god of like the moon and wisdom and writing, and with seeing him here, like my first thought was like, okay, we're gonna get the story of the whole it is written thing. Like we're gonna find out that Ibis, he wrote it, like it was written. But nope, we don't get that. But instead, Kratos is just told again to fulfill what is written, and that he is to use the blades to deal with these threats with no delay. But aside from this, we do get a little bit more, because in the grand scope, we're shown that this prophecy, or Kratos' destiny, as it would appear, that it goes above and beyond Athena, Ibis, or any of the other gods that we've seen. And even though Kratos sees this as just constant torment, Athena then lets him know that this torment is actually his purpose. So it's not like these gods are trying to make him do anything. And it's also here where he's told by Ibis, and I'm just gonna call him Ibis because that's what it looks like, but it's here where he tells Kratos that it's the same in the land of his birth as it is in the land of the pharaohs, which pretty much means no matter where Kratos would travel, he'll be walking into his destiny. And from there, the narrative, it dips back into like the cryptic realm of repetition and obscurity, with all of the gods telling him just to embrace his destiny and yada yada yada. But with us seeing this and it also showing us this mysterious prophet once again writing and taking down the words of this higher power who has ordered the steps of Kratos, and once again hinting that there's someone else higher up than just the gods that we'd seen before, or even the ones that we see now, and that this higher power, who is also unnamed, that he or she or they are truly the ones determining what Kratos needs to do, and these gods of the land are just showing up telling him to do it. But in the case of Athena, I still believe that she's here either of her own means or her own motives, with her now telling Kratos to go forward right after she was just telling him to come back. But all in all, when Kratos just picks up the blades and he leaves from this purgatory-like place and he goes back after the hippo, and all it really amounts to is really like this stretched out telling of Kratos accepting his past and owning every part of it, to where from there he has to move forward in his purpose, because if he doesn't, one way or the other, the path that he chooses is just going to trace him back to where he's called to be, which in a way gives us an explainer to why, even though he may not use the blades at times in the future, he'll always keep them close by, because practically he knows they'll always come back. But with the way that this whole thing wraps up and him killing the beast, like mind you, this was 4 issues, and with it concluding this way, I just feel like so much more could have been done with this series, because there was a lot of hype about this filling in the gap between God of War 3 and 2018 God of War. But instead, this entire series, it really just felt like page 1, because we didn't get anything about Freya, nothing at all about Norse mythology, which then also obviously means no sign of Atreus, but instead we just see Kratos travel to the land of Egypt, or the land of pharaohs, to where he was just surrounded in the obscurity, and we got a lot of that obscurity too, because Kratos didn't know what was going on, we didn't know what was going on, and we all were just lost the whole time. And with how this ends, the prophet just comes back and tells him that his work here in the land of pharaohs is done, and that's pretty much it. So I just wanted to come back, finish this up, didn't want to leave you guys hanging, but more than anything, I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments, so please, sound off. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below, so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm ready for this one. Because for me personally, with God of War Ragnarok on the way, I was hoping to have a lot more story than what we had got here heading in. Like just to build on top of what we got from the game in 2018. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.